Hello, Arthur. I am super excited to have this conversation with you for two reasons. One, I love you. You're a dear friend. And we've just had the most incredible, 45-minute conversation before this
45-minute warm-up.
Yeah. Talking about masculine and feminine language, capitalism, all of the things. A very heated and beautiful debate that was really stimulating, actually. And just one of the reasons that I want to have this conversation with you today, because every time I engage in meaningful conversation with you, my mind is expanded and my life makes a little bit more sense. So I'm really excited to share that with the people that are connected to me. I guess the topic for this conversation today is around, and I'm going to say productivity because it's, again, that's quite a limited word for the way that this spans. And you and I started working together, I guess, in that capacity a while ago now. I think we came into contact a while ago, and I was really struggling with getting things done in my business and achieving goals. And you specifically had a system and systems and processes that I was able to adopt, and they worked for me hugely. And that was really powerful for me. I think that just by using your planner and talking to you about a few different things, I was able to get the couple of clients under my belt that I needed in a really short period of time, like a couple of weeks. And that was able to help me, go home and say goodbye to my dad. It was like, really meaningful time in my life when some really, what on, to me now feel like simple systems that I implemented made a huge difference. So this is the planner that I'm talking about, Traction. I know that you've recently renamed your business to the Art of Living, which I love. I think you used to was Faster to Master, which is awesome. But I love that it's a bit more of like a rounded, balanced approach. And I think we want to talk about that today. Maybe really quickly before we jump in, you could just talk to our wonderful audience, who's a combination of the guys that we've got in our program, School of Magic's Retreat Accelerator, and the people that we've got in our wider community. And they're all, wellness coaches, wellness practitioners, people that have, amazing transformational gifts that they want to share with the world, and specifically in the context of kind of business and marketing, and kind of helping them to connect with people that they can help. But yeah, maybe you could give us a little bit of just a quick intro into what you do, and we can take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, every time Ella and I talk, there's a joke that I'm her anti-example for what a good business person should be. That I have the world's most sophisticated funnel and the world's least successful business because I refuse to niche, and I'm just interested in everything, and I want to solve all the problems rather than serving one community and serving one problem. So I guess that's a little bit of what I do. I love solving the big problems that all connect together and how that works. And I think you talked about, and we use the word productivity. It's helpful to think of that in two phases, I think, because there's slightly different problems that need to be solved. The first is there's a lot of the time we just struggle to get things done. We struggle to move in any direction, regardless of what direction that is. And there's also the second half of the problem, which is getting the right things done, right? And a lot of the time people let their worry about getting the right things done impede their ability to get anything done. And so they end up doing nothing. And some people get a lot of things done, but don't spend any time thinking about getting the right things done. And therefore they're very busy and stressed and overwhelmed, but they're not actually working on the things that move the needle. And so productivity helps. It a little bit depends who you are and what tendency you have, whether you're someone who does things, but you feel constantly frustrated that things aren't moving in the right place, or whether you're an overthinker and you just never really get the right things done, never get anything done. Productivity can help with both of those things. So I write about productivity. I write about lots of other topics as well, from health to love to wealth and lifestyle. So and accelerated learning is one of my big passions.
One of the things I love about you, I just feel like you're like this walking encyclopedia and like access to philosophy. I feel like there's nothing that you don't know about. I'm like, oh, ask Arthur about that. I'm sure he's got something to say. I recently started exploring Taoism, and I was like, pretty sure Arthur would have something to say about Taoism. Let me connect with him. And it's cool in that, like, the reason that you've ended up where you have has been and I'm paraphrasing, so like, correct me here. Your dissatisfaction with the life that was laid out for you in terms of the path that you were on, and kind of reaching a point of burnout with it and deciding that you wanted to do things differently, and carving out and developing a path and systems that support you in the type of life that you want to lead, which is very much, you know, focused on freedom and balance and enjoying all areas of life, not specifically just work and business. And that has actually helped a lot of people in their business, but it's also helped them to have sort of more rounded life. Is that a fair or a truthful way of explaining kind of how, I know you've got a longer story than that, but kind of how you've arrived at where you have? Because you're working for, you know, really powerful business, had a great career, and sort of decided like, this isn't for me at one point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I studied psychology, philosophy, and physiology at Oxford. And then I was also running two businesses at the same time, and I was investing in property. That was when I was like 18, 19 years old. And I sort of, I was very type A, like always trying to overachieve and do more than I had time for. And that got me into productivity early. And then I worked as an in-house entrepreneur in the city in finance, a financial derivatives business. And then I went to McKinsey and worked as a consultant there. If people know it, it's the top consulting management consulting firm in the world. And then a very good mutual friend of ours, Stuart, actually said something very profound to me recently, which I've been repeating and pretending is my own. He said, to realize what's important in the world, it often takes losing everything or getting everything. You know, and when you lose everything, you realize what's important. You know, when you face a near-death experience or something like that, or when you get everything, you know, you also realize that all the things you thought were important aren't important because you have them and you don't feel any happier. And I had this experience when I was 25, where I basically lost my grandparents and my dad in very quick succession, and ended up inheriting my financial freedom age 25. And I kind of ended up with both of those things. It's like getting my cake while being repeatedly kicked in the face, you know. And I left. I was like, okay, well, all the goals I thought I was working to for the next 40 years are no longer relevant. Like, I've already hit them. And at the same time, I was dealing with all of this stuff that had gone on as it was a lot like losing everything or losing myself and a lot of the things that I thought were important. And so I kind of built this Ferrari-like productivity system that kept me, you know, I was the guy you got on your team at McKinsey if the project was a mess. You know, you were like, let's get Arthur on, he'll help sort it out. I was like a super productive analyst, nothing ever slipped through the net. And then I was like, wow, I actually don't know where to point this anymore. Like, I have no goals. And so I went through what most people get to. Some entrepreneurs, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who've sold out of their businesses because they have the same thing, right? Where they're suddenly like, oh, wow, like, I've hit all my goals. But also in today's day and age, you know, financial freedom doesn't mean having $100 million in the bank. It just means having a business that generates an income that's more than you're ever going to possibly want to spend, right? And so more and more people are actually experiencing that. Whereas, 200 years ago, that would have been very, very rare. Now you see it a lot more, especially in the world that we live in. So.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's how
holy shit, what a story. Yeah, I think that's such a unique perspective to come at it from, and super powerful, because it's like, what are we doing it all for? And I think what you've done is kind of, you've gotten to that place that a lot of people are working towards, whether or not you wanted that to happen, and that, caused a certain level of devastation in your life. And so now you, like, in a good way, well, it's like devastation, I think, has a lot of negative connotations, but what you've done is then reverse engineered the system to make sure that people are heading, like, you understand what that looks like. And then you've reverse engineered the system to build it up so that people are going to get more than just financial success out of this whole experience, and can enjoy the journey, because at the end of the day, that is all we've got, is the here and now, and what happens tomorrow, and then the day after, and then the day after.
And so the phases I see people go through, and I think we'll talk a bit this, or we might not get onto it on this, but I think ours will be mainly focused on what I call competence. So I see productivity as having 3 levels. The first thing that most of us are concerned about is competence, which is where, like, how do I plan my days and my weeks so that I'm getting up and working on my business and moving it forwards? And for most people, financial freedom, or their business, or even the impact they want to have, those are the main things that consume them, right? But at the same time, there's all these other areas of life that are going on and they're trying to keep a hold on, but this is their major focus. Once you move past competence, you're like, okay, I know how to get stuff done. I feel like a competent person. I feel on top of my goals. I feel like I'm moving the needle. I feel like stuff is progressing. Then you start to lift your gaze a little bit higher. And then you go, this is where I meet people who are very productive, but are frustrated because even though they're very productive, they don't have enough time for their families, or they feel overwhelmed overwhelmed all the time, or their health and vitality is getting, their physical health or their mental health is getting away from them. And that's the stage of balance where I'm like, okay, well, now let's lift our gaze and start thinking, how do I get all of the areas of life? And I have 8 different areas that I work on people with. How do I get all those areas performing at the same level as the competence that I built in my professional? So business and career is usually the first one that people nail. And then once you've got like scoring 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 for satisfaction, all those areas, then you're like, okay, well, what now? Like, why? Like, those are enough for meaning and purpose. Then you're like, okay, well, what's the overwhelming, like, where am I working towards? What's my guiding star that I'm working towards? And that's more of a mission and purpose kind of level.
Yeah. I love this because there is kind of two levels here that I think we'll focus on in this conversation. And there's a lot of the people that join the program are in this kind of state of overwhelm. They've built success. They've got, good money coming in. They've managed to quit the matrix, and they're doing something purposeful and meaningful to them. But they've also kind of built a little bit of a prison for themselves, where they're exchanging dollars for hours. And we work with them to help them redesign their marketing, pick their niche, and build a better product, basically, right? Where they're able to scale that in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. And there's also systems that need and a process that they need to go through to reorder their life. And there's, I know for me, I was kind of a bit of like addicted to the work, as in like my to-do list needs to look like this in order for me to feel like I'm, doing all the things and getting it right. And having lots to do was something that had always felt, I think we over glorify like the whole being busy thing.
A lot of people, there's one of my favorite philosophers called Erich Fromm, and he wrote a book called Die Furcht vor Freiheit, which means the fear of freedom. Or like
I was like, is he speaking English then and I'm not hearing?
It's German. He's a German philosopher, but he wrote this book called The Fear of Freedom. And what happens to a lot of people is they get past competence and then they look at this big scary monster, which is life. Right. And they're like, God, I need to get my life sorted now. And life is such a big, I will talk about this later. Life is such a big problem that you cannot, it's too overwhelming to get into. And so what they do is they go, you know what, I'll just stick to the stuff that I know and I'm good at. I'll just add an extra 0 to my financial freedom goal and I'll just get back on with that because that's easier. Right. And so for a lot of people, like, okay, you give them the business that then generates a passive income or frees up 50, 60, 70% of their week. And because they don't know what to do with that time or how to approach the problem of solving it, they then end up just filling it with more busyness on the business. And that doesn't actually make them happy, right? And they just end up, and then they sort of burn out because they're like, oh, this isn't inciting anymore. So yeah.
And I think a lot of the guys, the people that we work with have reached, like they really value like personal freedom and aren't as addicted to the hustle as most, I would say. And they do have a why. They've got a good why. It's usually a combination of impact. They really want to help people and they want to like enjoy the sweetness of life. They want to travel. They want to spend time with their family. Like they've got a good sense of the world and what they want to achieve. So there's kind of 2 different levels in terms of the progress people have made with their business that we work with, and the people in the community that we like our paid program have kind of got through a lot of the challenges and actually built some success, but it's kind of a bit of this prison. And then some people are struggling to get momentum to get started. And I think a good place for us to start in terms of kind of a strategy or something to unpack would be this idea of procrastination, because I think they fall into both. They're problems at both levels. And the procrastination that I see happening in the program, and for people that have created some success, I see it as inaction, as in they won't show up to the calls, or they don't make the decision to make the investment or whatever it is, and they're not taking action to get themselves out of that prison. And then there's the people at the beginning, again, who are like, I just don't really know where to start. And you've got some really cool and a great way of explaining and unpacking this idea of procrastination. So I might just hand over to you to kind of run through what you just ran me through when I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people know they're procrastinating and they kind of look for solutions to the problem. And it's a bit like going into a doctor and saying, hey, I'm sick. Can you just give me some medicine? And no doctor would be like, yeah, I mean, maybe in America, they would be like, yeah, sure, here are pills.
Here's 5 drugs, yeah.
Here's $5,000 worth of meds, super. But like, a good doctor who wants to heal you won't say that, right? So the system that I always teach people to use, I say that the first thing you need to do if you feel like you're not acting is to work out why you're not taking action, right? And I always think there are 4 major reasons that we don't take action. The first is lack of clarity. So it's, I just don't know what to do next. And that could just be because you haven't planned it out. Like, you know roughly what the path is, but you don't know what your next action is. Or it could be that you just don't have the knowledge. You just don't know what to do next, right? The second is lack of courage, which is this fear, like both fear of failure, but also fear of success. Like what happened, you know, we talked about getting everything and losing everything. Like sometimes people don't want to get to the end of a problem because they just know that the problem afterwards is even more scary and they don't want to think about it, right? Or for a lot of people, it's a fixed mindset, a worry that if it doesn't work out the first time, it will mean something about them and that they're not adequate, and add to that feeling of inadequacy that a lot of us suffer with, right? So the third one is lack of motive. So for a lot of people, especially if you're a successful entrepreneur already, the reason you don't show up to these calls a lot of the time is you're doing this because you know you think you should be making more money, but actually you've already made more money than you ever really need.
Right.
And so you're not motivated. Like, why would you show up? And often it's about motive is always about reframing. So how do you like work out why what it is that you want to do is actually something you care about? And the last one is lack of energy. So lack of energy is really important. A problem is, there's no absolute size of a problem. A problem is only as large as you are relative to it in terms of your energy and your knowledge, right? So a lot of the time, if you get, it's like if you get to the end of a really tiring day, then running a 5K, even if you're someone who regularly runs 5Ks, would feel like a lot of effort. Whereas if you do it when you've just like, you're feeling rested and well done, 5K is nothing. You just blow it out the park, right? And that's an example of the same problem looking very different depending on how much energy you have. So that's the first step, is to really understand, okay, when you know you're procrastinating, to go, okay, is it lack of clarity, lack of courage, lack of motive, or lack of energy? But even before that, and we don't have to talk about this today, but before that, one of the most important things you can do is understand when you're procrastinating, because most people, I don't know if you remember from like the Pirates of the Caribbean, there's like this huge whirlpool in the ocean and all the ships are going around it. Most people don't realize that they're procrastinating until they're well into the procrastination storm, and they're carrying the guilt of procrastination, the shame. They're like 4 seasons of rewatching Game of Thrones into procrastinating. And that's a really friggin' hard, that's like a really hard escape velocity to get out of, right? So one of the most important things you can do is get really clear on when you're procrastinating. And something that's really easy to do is just sit down right now and just write a list of all the things you do when you're doing avoidant behaviors. So for me, it's things like I love playing games, because games give me a definite win. Games are a pitch to make sure you always feel like you're winning. Or it might be watching YouTube, or it might be window shopping, or it might be snacking. Maybe that's something you do, right? But what you do is you just write all these things down. Now, what it's not saying is you should never do these behaviors. All you're doing is you're writing down a list of symptoms to look out for early, and you're becoming more aware. Yeah, you become mindful of those things, right? And then what you do is, whenever you have a temptation to do it, you go, am I doing this thing because I just want to do it? Or am I doing this thing because I don't want to do something else? Right? And what that will help you do is it'll help you catch procrastination much earlier. So if you want to watch YouTube, that's totally fine. If YouTube is I always say, time intentionally wasted is never wasted time, right? If you're just chilling with your mates, or you want to call friends or whatever, that's great. You should definitely do that. If you're doing it because you don't want to work on the business plan that you've got, then that's procrastination. So the earlier you catch it, the easier it is to fix. Like any disease, you want to catch it in the first stages. Then what you do is go, okay, why am I procrastinating? Right. And then you mostly don't need to help people with that. If people know that it's because they're tired, the solution, there are many solutions I could give you, but a lot of them are pretty obvious. So that's the most powerful way to deal with procrastination.
I mean, I think that's really powerful, because like that, I have accountability on the bottom of the list of things that I want to talk to you about, but actually it's kind of this thing of like being able to hold yourself accountable for that procrastination. And even just that first exercise of going, how can I identify when, it's bringing awareness to your behavior, as opposed to it being something that you just do. It's being aware of like, what is my intention behind, and why is this, and giving yourself permission to do the things, and not having them on like a restrictive list, but just being mindful. And that, I think that what that's done for me, not specifically this list building, but this awareness of why it makes, I feel like I have a choice, right? Then I have a choice. I make a conscious decision. I'm going to do this, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be. And there are consequences either way to whatever it is that I choose to do. And if I choose to make this decision over here and move the needle in my business, I know what the good consequences of that will be. And if I choose to do this over here, I know what the consequences of this are going to be. And actually a really interesting thing for me to do has just been like indulge a little bit, because I've lived quite a controlled, restrictive life. So it's like sometimes I just need to know what it feels like to waste 3 days, right? And then I'm like, oh, that wasn't helpful. But if someone tells me don't ever waste 3 days, you kind of don't know what's on the other side of doing the
Yeah.
naughty thing. It's like when you overeat or eat all the ice cream. It's like, do it, eat all the ice cream one day and see if that feels good. Because once you reach that place, you'll know it doesn't, and you can make a better decision.
Yeah, it's one of the big arguments for intermittent fasting, right? Restricted eating times, is that if you eat all the time, but someone's always like, you can't have chocolate cake, the one thing you want is chocolate cake, just like all the time, right? But if you're actually, if you restrict when you eat, and then when you do eat, you can eat whatever you want. Yes, you can indulge, and it will remind you that it makes you feel terrible, but also at least you had that period of of good time where you weren't eating, where you were restricting your calorific intake or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think being increasingly mindful rather than blindly writing rules is a much more important way of doing it. And that's what I call that list your canary list, right? Because the miners used to take the canaries down into the mines, and then if there were poisonous gases, the canaries would pick them up first because they were small creatures. And so what you have is this list of things where just like, it's like, oh, today I really feel like not doing any work and playing computer games all day. What's that saying about me? That's saying probably that I don't want to work on whatever it is that's on my plate. And then I think to myself, why don't I want to work on it? Okay, it's because I actually haven't made a plan about what to do. So then I go into that, or it's because I'm actually pretty run down at the moment. So maybe I'll take the day off, and then I'll come back at it the next day, or I'll do some admin-y stuff today or whatever it is, but at least it gives you a framework to work through.
Yeah, definitely. There's that just mindful approach to what you're doing. And it's interesting for me. I tend to feel like if there's something on my list that I end up procrastinating on, I like very often when I get to it, I'm like, it just doesn't matter that much. I know that's actually not going to move the needle. So it's like a nice to have, but that doesn't fit in with the way that I operate my business, which is do the most important thing first. And actually, I really enjoy lying in the sun reading my book, and that sounds way better because I don't need to do this thing. I put it on my list because it's a nice to have, but I have, and now I feel pressure to get that done, but actually that's not that helpful. And maybe this can take us to the next point that I wanted to discuss with you, because that is something that you really helped me with, is actually prioritizing and having a system in place where I can, and we don't need to go, because there's a whole rabbit hole of being able to prioritize, right? And like go through those things. And I don't have a sophisticated system like the one that you've built, which is incredible for those that have a lot to do. I built a business that doesn't require that much effort to run, which I love. However, there is a system that you showed me in regards to like how you've structured it in your planner, that is a really simple way to build up momentum and make sure that you do get stuff done, and you can feel accomplished at the end of every day. So I was wondering if you could run us through what that looks like. So one of the most powerful tools that you shared with me, or practices that you shared with me, was the PM review. And then tracking habits like that, and it is just it's a kind of an expanded version of accountability. But maybe you could talk to something.
If we go at this level, what we're really dealing with is procrastination from lack of clarity. And when I say lack of clarity, I mean like you don't know what the next thing on your plate is, right? So this is a really powerful, and a lot of people struggle with this. So what the PM review is basically, it's just an evening review where you plan the next day. Now you plan it today, right? And so the two major steps of that are, one, looking at all of the lists of things you have to do and picking 6 things, like narrowing it down to 6 things you want to get done tomorrow. What are the top priorities? You have some other actions in there, but some top priorities, and then prioritizing those things. So that's step 1, is you go, if I could only do one thing on this list, what would it be? If I only had time tomorrow, let's say I actually had to spend the whole day tomorrow at a wedding, but I had 1 hour to get something done in the morning, which of the 6 things on my list would I do? And you put a 1 next to that, right? And then you get rid of that when you go, okay, out of these 5 remaining things, if I only had 1 hour tomorrow to do, what would I do? Okay, you put a 2 next to that, and so on and so forth. And it sounds like a lot of hard work, but actually you just become super quick. The way you think about it, you're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? The next thing you do is you plan out your ideal day. A lot of people resist me on this, especially creative people. They say, oh, but what if something changes tomorrow?
What about my flow?
Yeah, what if I wake up and everything's different? The ideal day is not, you should never let the plan get in the way of the right thing to do, right? The ideal day, though, is a way of waving a magic wand and saying, based on how I feel now, if I could have the perfect day tomorrow, what would it look like? right? And what you do is you write down, I would wake up at 6, even if you don't have an alarm, doesn't matter. You don't have to be like, oh, I can't do this because I don't set an alarm. Be like, I would wake up naturally at 6 a.m. I would have my coffee, do my morning routine, whatever it is. I'd work on my most important tasks. I'd go through, I'd have my lunch, I'd hang out with my friends. So you write an ideal day down, right? And what you're doing while you're doing that is you're making sure that you've blocked time in the day for each of the 6 things you've written down. The reason I like to do this, there are a couple of apps out there like Monday and things like that, which will try and get you to do this in your calendar. Horrible idea.
I remember you and I had the best conversation. I was like, Arthur, I've nailed it. Look at this day that I've blocked out from, and it was like this multicolored 0 gap day. And you were like, yeah, you've kind of missed the point, Ella. I was like, shit.
No. I think the idea of block. So there's a couple of things there. So first, I'm using colors, amazing, love that. The no gap in your day, I think it's really important to always pencil buffer time into your day. So that's a very tactical thing, but like things always take longer than you think they're going to. You wake up later, you have travel time, you forget to put in. I always consciously put what I call at least half an hour to an hour of buffer time into my day, which is usually sort of middle of the afternoon, which is just to suck up any of that stuff that's gone on. And if I get to my buffer time, I'm totally on track. I'll either get ahead of my work or I'll just use it to recover and call a friend or do whatever it is that I want to do. So having time in your day is important. Not using your calendar is important because your calendar should literally only be the things that you must do on a day. It should only contain appointments. If you try and time block everything in your calendar, then what happens is appointments also land in your calendar. And you see these calendars where they're like quadruple booked, you know, like things have come in over the place. It's a pain to drag stuff around. It's why I don't like these digital apps that do it, right? You want to put everything into an easy to manipulate paper and pencil kind of system. And then what happens is people hate that. 2 things happen. One, you look at your calendar and it's very hard to work out what were the things on this that I were on today that I must do, and what were the things that I would like to do. And so every time you look at your calendar, it's a mental gymnastics thing where you're like, oh, I have to go to this meeting, but going to the gym is voluntary or whatever it is. The second thing is people just stop looking at their calendars, and then the system is entirely pointless, right? So I'm a big calendar user, but I always plan my day outside of my calendar. I don't use the actual physical planner. I do it in a PDF, or you could just do it on a PDF or in a note or whatever it is you want to do, but plan it outside your calendar. So that's the main thing. So what you're doing then is you're basically going, oh, okay. Because what a lot of people do is they do they write their to-do list for tomorrow, and then they do their ideal day. And they're like, I've actually only got time to do the top 3 things on this list, right? And that's fine, that's cool. But what you've done is you've suddenly realized that actually tomorrow is going to be busier than you realize, or that the 3 things on your list are huge projects. And so instead of going through tomorrow, getting to the end of the day and only having 3 things done and feeling like a total failure, you know, which is what a lot of people do, they set themselves up for failure every day. You can anticipate that you're setting yourself up for failure and be like, oh yeah, I've planned 28 hours worth of work tomorrow. That's probably not going to work. So you then cancel some of those things out or change things around. So it just helps you. It does 2 things. One, it gets you clear on what it is you're going to work on tomorrow. Whether that's the right thing or not is a whole other question, but it gets you clear on what's next. And 2, it sets you up for success. It makes sure that you're not planning 6 things that you know in advance you physically cannot fit into your day. And the third thing it does is it creates accountability, because one of the other most important things you can do is start tracking your time. So over the course of the day, I'm not talking in 1 or 2 minute increments. You don't need one of these fancy apps where you're tracking it on a second by second basis. I do the minimum amount I do is 15-minute chunks, but usually I have big 2-hour chunks of work where I go through. And what you'll learn over time, you'll look at your ideal schedule, which is what you wish your day was like in an ideal world. And you'll look at your actual schedule and you'll learn a ton of stuff, right? You'll learn that certain kinds of activities take longer than you think they will. You'll learn that actually, you know, planning to wake up at 6 a.m. every day when you only realistically get out of bed at 7 a.m. is a pipe dream. And again, you're setting yourself up for shame and guilt and anxiety from doing it. You'll learn that actually you run out of energy at about 3 in-the-afternoon. And so probably moving that gym session to before lunch is a better, what will slowly happen is 2 things. One, your ideal day will become more realistic. You get much better at setting expectations for yourself. And 2, you'll hold yourself accountable. Your actual day will start to trend more towards the ideal day that you set yourself. So you'll change things in both ways. And both of those will help you have successful days where you're actually doing things that you say you want to do.
Yeah. So there's 2 things that one thing I just wanted to say that I've definitely taken away from this process is, well, if they're kind of related. So I think what I'm hearing, and I think an important takeaway from this, is that these systems and processes are not another measuring stick for you to beat yourself with when you don't do the thing, like the goal or the things that you say. It's simply unachieved. It's simply an awareness tool, right? Of actually like,
you're already beating yourself. You're already beating yourself with a stick. You just haven't, because you haven't written it down. It's an invisible stick.
Right.
And so you get to the end of every day and you're covered in frigging bruises because you mentally were like, I wanted to achieve 28 things and you didn't, because you physically couldn't do them. And so what this does is simply like, it makes clear the stick you're already beating yourself with and helps you actually realize that that's not helpful.
Right. And that's something that the other thing I was going to say is like, I do that now. Like I'll put something on my to-do list and I'll mentally go, that's nice that you've noted that at some point needs doing. Is that something that you actually have time for today and want to get done today? And I have like a today's top priorities and other actions in your thing. And I'm very mindful of what goes on today's top priorities and what goes in other actions. And my other actions column is kind of just this rolling column that I actually don't look at in terms of like, my goal is to get things checked off there. Like they go on there if they're kind of like, they're rolling, right? Was the today's top priorities, because I am like a type A as well, right? That really wants to know I'm doing a good job. And so like, you know, there's this idea of like rigging the game in your favor, right? Like so that you feel like you are winning and you're not just creating another construct for you to feel like you're failing within. And that was huge for me in this process, because you know, I have felt unproductive. And then the story that I tell myself when I get to the end of a day and I haven't done the thing, or, you know, when I go to a meeting and someone's like, you know, so how are you going with that? And I'm like, I haven't done it, you know? And this is like, even back in like my working in corporate days, this feeling of like, so does that mean I'm lazy? And does that mean I'm just shit? You know, like I had this identity of like, I'm not a productive or disciplined enough person. Like people like, just do it. And it's like, well, there's a lot going on for me beneath the surface, you know, and this has really helped me to be a more objective and less emotional about my relationship to my output of stuff. And the other thing that's been super helpful, and I'll just see if I can bring up a thing here, is the tracking of the habits and the metrics. So having you know, things that I can track every day of going, did I do it? Did I not? And again, you know, I remember we were on a surf trip together or something, and I was like, you know, you were like, I think when I first started using the planner, and you're like, can I have a look? And I was like, oh, okay, sure, you can have a look. And it's like, I'm like, see this, but you're like, you haven't filled it out. And I'm like, yeah, because I haven't done it. And you're like, no, it's really important that you note that you haven't done it, because one day you'll do it. And then when you have a check as opposed to a cross, you'll feel really good about that. And then you can start to build momentum. And I was like, oh, the metric of success is track it. Whether it's done or not done is a different story. And that changed things. I mean, you can see I've hardly followed through with this particular week here, but I think that was a really valuable lesson in terms of, again, just awareness and observation of what is without judgment, as opposed to a game that you end up playing with yourself, a kind of cat and mouse of like avoiding what's actually going on for you.
Sure. I mean, the reason I call the system traction is because I deeply believe that people are super smart. You're super smart, you know what is right, you know what needs to get done, you're naturally a very good planner and prioritizer. But what happens is your mind is bigger than the day, right? And so what happens by tracking things, by giving yourself data, you actually give yourself the information you need to make decisions that set you up for success and celebrate success as well when it happens, instead of like getting to the end of every day and having this mental to-do list where you set yourself, you mentally had expected yourself to get 32 hours of work done, and then you only got, and what either happens is you end up working a long day and you still feel disappointed with yourself, or you feel so overwhelmed that you never get started in the first place. You know, you're just like, oh, I'll just go surfing for 6 hours instead because that's easier to do, right? And so I remember the first time I sat down and I remember I'd been beating myself up for months about not being productive, and I was working hard. And I sat down, I was like, okay, I'm going to write all the projects that I have on for this week and how many hours I'm expecting out of myself this week. You get 168 hours in a week. I had something like 230 hours of expectations that I put on myself, you know, and the way that I was trying to get through it, and I was doing, so for some people, the reaction is run away. For me, it was like, burning myself out. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can shave half an hour of sleep off here, or an hour, or maybe I can eat my meals in 15 minutes, and I remember one of my ex-girlfriends was like, one of the main things I learned from our relationships is never to enjoy doing anything anymore. And I was like, wow, that's pretty damning indictment of my, and so what that helped me do is realize that the reason that I was doing that, I was constantly setting myself up for failure. I was achieving a ton of stuff, but like every day, even though I was achieving a lot, I would kick myself. The other bonus perk out of this, by the way, is that sometimes you get to the end of the week, you have a crappy Friday, some project overruns, you miss one goal that was important to you, whatever it is, and you feel like your week has been a failure. Mm-hmm. And then you look back on the daily, so the planner has daily pages and weekly goals and also the habit tracking, and you look back on the week and you go, actually, I had a great week. Because there's a temptation when you have a crappy end to the week to look back on the week with shit tinted spectacles, right? Where you're like, oh, everything this week was a failure and my life sucks and it's awful. And then you look back and you're like, oh, actually, I did a great job. Well done, me. I got all my stuff done. And that's really important as well. So it's not just about accountability. It's about tracking what's happening so you can work out what the opportunities are for improvement, how you can start doing less of some stuff, which we'll talk about in a bit, and also celebrating the wins, giving yourself the data you need to be to make the right decisions. Yeah.
I think that's so powerful. Like the rigging the game for success, so that, and it is just about having that objectivity, because our minds are so geared towards looking for the things that are going wrong as well, and we don't spend enough time celebrating the things that are going right. And what we have achieved, and like you said, a really good week can go awry in our minds because we didn't get something specific done. There's a section in the daily part here about wins, and I used to go through the funniest process. I'd sit down in the evening to write it, and I'd be like, I don't know if I won today. And then I'd start finding little things, right, to write down. I'd be like, oh, I had a great conversation with so and so, or like, oh, this was super fun. And then I'd be like, oh, and then I made a sale. Oh, that was good. And then I'll realize all these big, awesome things that happen. Oh, that got, and I'm like, it's the same practice, I guess, as like gratitude, right? It's like programming yourself to look for the things that went right. And then you've got lessons learned, which I love. And then from that, opportunities for improvement. And then 3 things that I'm grateful for. What an amazing practice to go through at the end of every day. Just objectively actually looking at what is really going on, not the story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah. And by the way, a great thing to do when you're feeling down, if you're having a crappy day, is just to go back and read through your wins for the last 2 weeks and just be like, actually, and all the things that you're grateful for, and to pick out those themes. And you do that there is as well as a PM review, there's a weekly review where you kind of go and synthesize the week, where you also do what are the wins. But it's great to just remind yourself that you are making progress. So there's a lot of victory and celebration. And it's called traction because you're tracking stuff, right? And it helps you start making progress.
There is so much more that I want to talk to you about all of the things. And I think maybe we'll have to have another session based on some feedback from this conversation. I'm super curious to hear what people in this space are specifically struggling with when it comes to these things, because everybody has a slightly different, story that they're telling themselves about why they're not getting things done. And I think that I'm really curious to hear what they are. I wanted to just wrap up this conversation talking about, I guess, accountability, and the reason for that is momentum. It seems to be, for me, the thing that just moves me through life, right? It's like, if I can get momentum with something, I'm winning. And then if I stop and then I find myself in this procrastination and I go, it's like this, it's a bit of a downward spiral. If you were to recommend, if I'm feeling in overwhelm and I'm feeling bad about my ability to get stuff done or get stuff started, or I'm feeling an overwhelm, what can I do, like an action that I can take to make a change?
Well, so I think the problem is that overwhelm is an emotion that's related to procrastination. We often feel overwhelmed. And so I would say, go back to the model and go, why do you feel overwhelmed? Is it because you're not clear so lack of clarity can be like, you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what you're doing next, or maybe your head's just full of stuff. You know, each one of those has a different thing. If you don't have the knowledge, go out and find the problem. If you're not sure what to do next, just write a plan. If your head's just full, just get everything out of your head onto a piece of paper. Often that can be enough to stop you from feeling overwhelmed. If it's lack of courage, you could do things like fear setting exercises, or you can do pre-mortems or whatever it is that you need to address that fear up front. If it's lack of energy, it could be have a snack, go for a nap, take a walk, all those kind of things. If it's lack of motive, often it's about reframing what it is that you need to do in the context of something that you're excited about. So linking whatever task it is back to the impact you want to have, or the future that you want to build for yourself. There's also an element, so because I know you want to talk about accountability, that's something that's great to do. It's more of a so the traction planner, and for example, marking down even when you didn't get stuff done, is about creating self accountability. Is about, just because your brain is very good at thinking about stuff, it's much less good at keeping track of it. So it's just about putting that somewhere where you can see it and celebrate streaks or see where things are going wrong, but also working with other people to work to making commitments to others is a really powerful way to help you over little humps, which can be the difference between breaking a streak and keeping that momentum going. So I have a thing in my community, an area called Execution Club, where we sit down and we post our weekly goals, everyone in the group. And then I give feedback on specific feedback on like how to change the way you write goals to set them up for success. Because some people often write goals in a way that instantly sets them up for failure. So I help them rewrite those. But also, just like for me, a lot of the time when I'm like, oh, I really don't feel like stretching today, it's the knowledge that I'm going to go and report back to other people that I haven't done it, that is like the thing that tips me over the edge, where I'm like, okay, I'll just do the stretch already, and I just get it done so I can tick it off. So accountability, the planner will help you do that in a personal way. But if you haven't got that, and I know you do have that in your community, sharing your goals with your peers, having the teachers come back to you and give feedback on, is the goal written in the right way, and B, is it realistic? You know, if you're just starting out and your goal is, I want to make $1 million by the end of the year, having someone who's been down the path go, actually, you know, a great stretch milestone for you would be this. That's really powerful. And then just sharing the wins and celebrations and the observations. You can learn so much from what other people learn from their reporting back on their goals. Is very important.
That's awesome. That's where I was kind of hoping we'd get to is like the community support, because I mean, honestly, self accountability is super powerful and absolutely needs to happen. And I know for me that, I mean, I can just get stuck in my own head, and I've learned like a default mechanism for me now is, if I'm feeling like in overwhelm and I'm not feeling good about whatever's going on, I journal about it first to give myself a bit more clarity. And then I speak to my mentors and I tell them what's going on for me. And I engage with my community, my masterminds, right? Because that reflection just changes everything. And having a space that I am accountable to, just like you said, sharing with your peers and being accountable in that space, that you kind of, there's nowhere to hide from that, right? Like, and you have to show up and you're being witnessed, you're being watched. And that is a really powerful way to hold yourself accountable when you might struggle to show up for yourself. Is like, you know, you've got something, a purpose outside of yourself that exists. And that was huge for me when I was, you know, a couple of years ago when I was looking to get those really powerful results, was having your community to post my goals in. And then have you give feedback on those goals was huge. I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't even know I was writing my goal the wrong way. Okay, cool. Well, I'll do it this way.
Wrong is a strong word, but like in a way that, you know, if you're often I say to people, for example, switching input to output goals, like if you write, my goal is to complete this, often that sets you up for failure, because that thing could spiral into 12 hours of work. If you say my goal is to put 4 hours of work into this, then that's a goal that you can always hit no matter what happens, right? But awesome. Community is important. I would say the two important things. One, if you are sharing goals with the community, it's important to write them down, because accountability is one thing, but we are humans are forgetful. I don't even remember what I had for lunch 2 days ago. And so if I commit something to a group of people and it's woolly and it's on a call and I'm like, I'm going to do this, you know, people have their own things. In 2 weeks, they'll forget it. So the thing that I always do in my community is make sure you share the goal. And then every week you report back on what you did last week. So tick or cross, like, did you do stuff? And then what you're planning to do next week, because that helps you maintain that continuity. But yeah, I think something that's probably very relevant for the people listening to this is that, you know, I became significantly more consistent with productivity when I started teaching it to other people. You know, teaching something to other people is an amazing way to become accountable. You know, I mean, when you know that you're teaching people how to run sales calls, you know, you are going to hold yourself accountable to book those sales calls and run them the best you possibly can, right?
Yep.
So finding a way to just the impact, the mission that you've got, the reason that your niche is going to be very powerful, because it's going to transform your ability to perform in that area, whatever it is that you choose.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. So Arthur, thank you so much for sharing everything that you have with us today. It's the tip of the iceberg and hopefully been helpful.
We only touched 10%.
We really did. We really did. We had a plan and we got through 1, 2, and 5. And we missed balance and pressure, which we can talk about another time. I do think that there's definitely a lot of benefit. And I also think that our conversation prior to this call was so good. I feel like that's a conversation that needs to be unpacked as well. If people want to connect with you more and learn more about how you can help them and be part of your communities, where can they reach you?
Well, I guess wherever this video is, you will post some links.
I will. Yeah. Okay. And so the Art of Living being your home online.
So I'm not on any social media. I actually just deleted all my social media accounts because I hate them and they make me miserable. So I'm theartofliving.com. But yeah, I think the quickest way, I guess, I'll give you a list of some of the links that we've talked about. So a link to the planner, a link, there's a productivity primer, there's the community, there's those kind of things. The best way is just to follow those links from Ella and they'll take you to the right place. And if you ever want to reach out to me, I do love hearing from people. So I'll put my email address on the notes as well, and you're very welcome to email me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. And having you in my life has been, on a friendship level has been absolutely incredible. Like just having you in my life as, someone that I love has been wonderful. And the work that we've done together in terms of you helping me with my business and my productivity has been huge. And I literally have a back stash of planners waiting for me when I get home. And I'm like, shit, I better not finish this one. Because it really, just having it, even just being committed to having it, it's funny talking on this call today. I'm like, I need to get back into using this a little bit more. So I'm like, great. So I need to hold myself accountable for that. And I probably need to start posting it back in your community again. That would actually
there's nothing. I'm a big believer in simplicity. I hate productivity for productivity's sake. The only systems that and again, especially for people who aren't used to this, if there's no practical reason for doing it, don't do it. All of my systems are built around simplicity, and so that they're not, some kind of big overhead that you need to do. So if it's in the planner, it's worth doing. If it's like that, I could have included 4, 5, 6, 7 more templates in the planner. Many planners waste a lot of pages on stuff that is superfluous. It's none of my stuff is. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's the little bit that moves the needle for sure. Yeah. For sure. Arthur, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Come
so
back
much.
to Bali soon.
Yes, yeah, I will be back very soon. Big love and thank you so much for today.
Bye.
Bye.